Hello, and welcome to the Physical Therapy Owners Club podcast. I am Nathan Shields, and I've got longtime friend and business partner Will Humphreys on with me today. Hey, Will.
Hello, welcome to
How are you
myself.
doing? Thanks for joining me today, man. It's always good to have you on. Honestly, I don't know if you know, we get a lot of compliments when we get together because we are able to share some good information, it seems, and people really appreciate that. So thanks for joining me again.
Dude, I look forward to these podcasts so much because you and I were in the trenches for so long, and we still are. We've maintained partnerships in other businesses as well as like just general connection. And again, that's a rare thing in business at all. But like we also have this like shared history of like painful trauma that
Yeah.
bonds us eternally.
We were brothers in the trenches, right?
Brothers in the trenches, man.
Right. Cool. Well, it's exciting to talk with you today because we're going to share on this episode some of our biggest mistakes when it came to ownership throughout the years. I'm going back. Well, I started the clinic 20 years ago,
Yeah.
and you joined forces with us, 17, 18 years ago?
2003.
Wow. Yeah. So almost
19.
2 decades, right?
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of shared history, a lot of mistakes along the way, right?
I don't even know how to like emphasize that in a way to where like people listening understand the amount of failure that I feel like we've
We've been through
absorbed.
so much. And I've shared with it in the past. If you could put a dollar value as well as health challenges that we've had because of
Oh,
it, as well as late nights or sleepless nights that we've had to deal with through all this time, there's plenty to share, right?
oh man, the headaches, the lost sleep, the impotence, all of it. That's just like, so dude,
Right.
like for me, it's so funny because like I look back on those times with so much like appreciation now
Mm,
and all that. But dude, it's like it was absolutely hell on earth during the
yeah.
time, right?
Yeah, exactly. So let's get into it. Let's start talking. We're going to share today some of our biggest mistakes that came to mind. And as I told Will, as we were preparing for this, that he's obviously going to share some mistakes that he's made. And it's going to spur others some ideas and stories in my mind. This could become a really long laundry list, but we've got some good stories to share, I know, and I don't even know what Will's going to share. Right. So this is going to be a good one for those who are like, oh, maybe you guys aren't all of that great. Maybe you guys do have some warts. And I'm like, yes, we do have plenty of warts. You just don't want to see them. So I'll let you start. What is one of the biggest mistakes you've made in ownership over the years?
Okay, totally. So before I say number one, just to make sure that the audience understands, you and I wrote them down. We haven't discussed them. We're revealing them in real time for the first time.
Right.
And my list isn't in a particular order.
No.
They were all very costly, painful mistakes. The first, it's kind of a general mistake, but it's this idea that I was too busy to not treat patients all the time. And especially too busy to get help. Right. So like, when we opened up that Maricopa location together,
Yeah.
and we were treating elsewhere, and we were splitting any additional spare time, if there is such a thing, in opening that location, I remember, I really thought I was so busy. It's like, oh, other people think they're busy. I am busier than I can handle. I remember my AC in my white truck, my little Tacoma. I guess that's driving a truck. Is what that is. For those of you who are watching, I don't know what this is. But I was driving my Tacoma, and I used to bring an extra shirt with me because my AC was out and it's Arizona. And I'd drive the hour and a half to 2 hours to the clinic and then change my shirt and change patients because I was drenched in sweat. And like that was my Tuesday and Thursday short days at my other clinic. And so like in that mindset, I was literally killing myself. I had all sorts of heart issues, and I just thought I was too busy to get coaching. And so I think of it like this. My first biggest mistake was thinking I was too busy and that coaching was too expensive for me to get it. And that was, maybe that is the biggest mistake I ever made, because for me, everything changed when I chose to like, forget it. I'm going to make sure I have coaching every week, and this is what it's going to look like no matter what.
Yeah. And I remember your story distinctly because you had been invited to become part of the Entrepreneurs Organization Small Business Network. And did you actually even pay for it for the first year and just never attend? Was that the story?
I did. So yeah, Entrepreneurs Organization, something we should mention. Totally go join it. If your company grosses over $1 million, stop being an idiot and go join EO. If you are grossing less than 600 or less than $1 million, you qualify for Accelerator, which is their introductory program, which I think is insanely awesome.
Yes.
And that I did. I was in the first inaugural class in Arizona. I paid for the year, never showed up. Second year, I was there the first day after I almost walked away from our business from exhaustion. And the guy there, Scott Fritz, who's a guest on your show recently, was like, "Who are you?" And I told him the story, and he hadn't stopped making fun of me to this day in 15 years about how I paid for it and I never showed up because I was too
right. Well, that goes along with one of my first mistakes. It is a catch-all that I didn't get some kind of support, coaching, you name it. And I don't know if it was necessarily like I knew what coaching was and chose not to accept it. I don't think I really believed that there was such a resource out there that could help me. I felt like I was alone on an island. I was going to have to figure this out myself. I'd heard of SCORE, the volunteer retired businessman who would share an hour a month at the local chamber of commerce. I thought, oh, maybe that'd be a good idea to get a little bit of help and support. And then I'd lean on my dad once in a while. And I just assumed this is how it is. And I've got to figure it all out. Ignorance, some naivete, maybe. At the same time, back then, 15, 20 years ago, there weren't the resources that there are now. I chalk up one of my biggest mistakes was not getting some kind of coaching consulting support.
What's cool about that too is that like you and I have had numerous coaches over the years. So for people who are listening who don't have experience in coaching, coaching is a broad term and every coach has something of value. I have never, ever, I've had 20 over the last 15 years. I've never hired a coach that I thought wasn't worth what I paid for them. Right. I've never had that happen. I'm sure they exist, but the bigger mistake isn't paying for a coach. Like people get afraid, like I don't want to overpay for a coach. It's like, no, they all have something different to offer. And like every one of them are worth, sometimes even working in tandem together. At one point we'd have a couple of coaches in our company helping us do different things. But man, that was easily the best part of our learning was hiring coaches.
Yeah, you can definitely track our trajectory as a business to when we started getting some coaching.
Yes.
Yeah. I parried off yours a little bit. Mine that I'll share is somewhat, I guess not too similar, but I was a big fan at the time and I didn't really recognize what I was doing, but it's easy to see now. I was a big fan of abdication instead of delegation. If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
One of my biggest mistakes was just saying, I hire you to do whatever I tell you to do. And I would say that in my interviews. Your job is to do whatever I tell you to do. And that was the extent of my planning, my organization. That's the extent of the effort that I put into putting together a job description for anybody in my team. It's like you have some general ideas and you have a title, but otherwise, I'm not going to take the time to write it down. I'm just going to say, just do what I tell you to do, and you're going to be just fine.
Totally.
Yeah, and I thought that would work out well. So yeah, that was one of my bigger mistakes was just say, just go do that without any training, without any real support. It was pretty sad.
That is funny.
And I thought I was so cool doing it. I'm just like, I'm the boss. So just do what I say.
Well, I think on the extreme opposite end of that, this isn't on my list, but I was kind of the opposite leader. It was like, oh, let me do that for you. Oh. I was the bypasser. That's where you and I are probably a little bit different because like when I hired people, I didn't train them either. And then I felt like it was all my fault. And so then I would go do their job for them. I used to have a PT. I remember when I was seeing over 100 visits a week and they were seeing like 30 and like talking about how stressed they were. And I'm like, oh, okay, let me help you with that. Like it was just without leadership and statistics, we can abdicate or bypass. And that neither one of those are healthy, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. All right, your turn.
Okay. My next one is not learning how to recruit talent. Like I was so worried as a business owner on marketing, new patients. And like, I felt like I was at the effect of recruiting physical therapists, but like my worry wasn't because I was able to treat, I found myself judging my happiness based off the number of new patients on my schedule. Okay. And then later new patients as a whole. But when I came to realize the hard way was that like, if I can learn how to hire people, and every PT says it's hard to hire, which is a bunch of crap. Even in this market, it's not hard to hire if you know how. But like putting all that energy into learning how to hire, it almost took away the need to put so much energy into marketing, because when we hire great talent, it rains patients because they're so amazing. Like patients tell their friends, and if you have a problem that we don't know how to solve, if you know how to hire, you can hire the person to solve the problem and not have to learn how to do it, whether it's billing or leadership. Like literally recruiting to me was like, I wish I had figured that. I made that the last thing I learned. I wish I had made that the first thing I learned how to do.
Interesting, man. Yeah, but I can look back on my history as well and see when I had team members who were aligned and engaged, and not because I was really good at recruiting at the time. It happened upon these people, right? But as I had them, my numbers increased. My total visits, my new patients, and I'm sure if I delve deeper into the statistics, the patient's engagement and the number of times they came to the clinic per week or per episode, per plan of care, all those things would have improved as I had those more aligned providers on the team.
Dude, and the drama differential. Like when I was, I can't tell any specific stories without like totally throwing people under the bus, but I've been through a million of those HR discussions where the PT or a team member is like, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? And you just see your heart sinks into your stomach because it's going to be this emotional, like, my feelings are hurt because you did. And look, in almost every case, they weren't wrong. Like I probably made every mistake in the book that justified it. But when I learned how to hire talented, better aligned people, they were able to give me the benefit of the doubt or bring it up in a way that wasn't so emotionally draining. And those were the people that like taught me how to really grow. The previous employees that were just constantly upset with me. Mm-hmm. And really it was all my fault. It wasn't their fault, but like as an owner, if we can learn how to attract the right people, we don't have any of those discussions and we don't have to get hemorrhoids or whatever. I don't know why that was the medical.
Where'd that come from?
I don't know why that was the medical condition that came to mind. Maybe, pain in the butt. Pain in the butt. Hey, see, my subconscious is smarter than me.
Bring it full circle. There you go. But mine is not much different than yours. And to build off of that, and one of the things that I wrote down prior to our discussion was that I held on to team members too long out of fear, right? Not figuring, this person's good enough, right? So why don't I just deal with the headaches that they cause and try to work around them or build them back up? But as I can look back, and I'm sure you may agree, as we progressed as leaders and our recruiting got better, we were unwilling to keep those people on as long, right?
Yeah.
The fear related to losing them somehow dissipated. And we thought, wait, I've been through this so many times where tolerating such and such a person has never gotten me anywhere. It's easier, and I see it now, where if we let them go, there are a lot of good opportunities, a lot of other people that are willing to take their place and do significantly better. And prior to having that thought process, prior to going through those experiences, I just was in fear of losing them and keeping them on too long.
That's actually one of mine. It's worded differently, but mine was not tolerating. I'm reading it now. Tolerating sub-aligned people. So like, again, I think the reason that I held on to my people longer than I should have, Nate, was because I was insecure about me as a leader. Like, maybe they aren't great because it's my fault. Even if I knew they were like not good fits or they were just honestly really hard to work with, I was always like, well, maybe it's because I'm not a good enough leader to give them what they need. And never like did it occur to me until later that I was just being weak. Mm-hmm. And like really the driving force was fear of like, what am I going to do with that patient load if I let them go?
Totally.
And like, what are other people going to say in my small town of Florence? What are they going to say? And what I learned is that like, when I had the courage to finally fire people, other team members all of a sudden like appreciated their job. They didn't like start thinking negatively. They started appreciating it. The community saw the change as like, wow, you're growing. I'm like, well, okay. And And like, it got to that point where you and I, towards the end, we were obsessive about fits. Like, I remember, every quarter we would go through and ask, would we emphatically rehire every person? And if it was no, we started either coaching them or firing them. It was like, because it's not even about us. It's like, yeah, we are what we are, imperfect in everything. So if we can find people that are like better fit for our version of imperfection, the happier we'll all be.
Yeah.
So yeah, not learning that lesson was like tolerating, poor aligned people was one of the top mistakes I ever made, for sure, as well.
Yeah, and to go with that, there were a few people that I hired that weren't good fits, and I finally got the courage to let them go.
Sure.
And then team members came to me after the fact saying, "Yeah, it's about time."
Yeah.
Like, they saw that they weren't a good fit, and they were really disappointed. I could tell that they lost respect for me. They didn't say it so much, but I can just imagine they were losing respect for me for tolerating that person. And then when I finally let them go, they thought, finally, now we can actually improve, or now we finally have them off the boat. It's so much better that they're not here. And I thought, oh, I wish I had known what you guys thought ahead of time.
I know, it's so weird. I mean, again, I've never, and I think I've heard you say this too, Nate, is that I've never regretted firing someone. Not once. I've only regretted not firing them fast enough. And every time it happens, like you said, out of the woodwork, people are like, well, did you also know that they were, doing drugs in the back office? You're like, what? Like, all these things are coming to light. Like, this is so crazy. Right. And and then you just, again, you're like, why didn't you guys tell me? Because you're the leader. It's your job. And that's the thing is, right, our instincts are always telling us it's not a fit. It's what we choose to do with that feeling that makes us successful or not.
Right. We should probably say, at least I never found anyone to have done drugs in my back room, so we don't implicate past employees. I'm just worried that past employees are going to listen to this and like, well, who was doing drugs in the back?
I totally had an employee who came to work. I don't know if they were doing them there, but one of the people I hired was a front desk person who came totally stoned a few times. Oh, really? I mean, it was one of those things that was the most interesting fire, because this front desk, this was the most, I had a new director in training with me when I fired her. And she was just one of those where, like, there was lots of things going wrong. Like, it was a bad hire from the beginning, and I wasn't a good leader. And so I just let it go on too long, but she did. And I do drugs and that kind of stuff. I don't know if she did them on site, but honestly, it didn't matter because she was high anyway a couple of times. And so when I fired her, I'll never forget, that was one of those where it's like, hey, listen, let's call her Susan, because her name was Susan. Just kidding. It wasn't. But I was like, hey, Susan, it's not working out. We're going to have to let you go. And it wasn't even why, Will. It was, you son of a bee. How dare you come in here and say good morning to me? You're so full of S. I hope you effing die. She stood up. She like threw things off the table. And I remember the guy that was sitting next to me in the office. I'm not telling you the location because it might narrow it down for some of our.
Right.
Because the guy that was sitting with me was just like bug-eyed and quiet and like kind of shying backwards in his hair. And I eventually, I'm like, you have to go. Like, you better leave now. She stayed out front yelling at patients as they came and went, smoking like just, hey, don't go in there. Will's an a-hole. Like, it's just as people were coming in and out. Wow. And eventually I went out there. I'm like, hey, you got to leave the property now. I'm going to call the cops. She's like, you go ahead. And I picked up the phone and then she ran. And that was the last I heard of Susan. She was in the front desk.
Oh my gosh. What a great story.
Yeah. Thank you. It was a really bad day.
I can only imagine.
But when I went back to the team and they all heard it, I'm like, hey guys, you probably heard what happened, but Susan's no longer with us. And they're like, finally. Like, I was the idiot for taking that long to let her go.
You were the one guy you were the last guy to finally figure it out.
Totally.
All right. So you're next.
Am I? On the topic of firing, when we had to make changes, like, so they call firing like taking a cut, right? You make a cut in your company. Right. But if we have to cut, you have to cut deep. So one of my mistakes was not learning how to cut deep. What that means is, we've had various locations. We had one location in particular where somebody was creating a counterculture without us knowing it, saying one thing to us and then doing something else behind the scenes. And when that person finally left, like it was a death by a million cuts. And I've actually coached recently a couple of companies where they have a team of people that have been tainted by what we call a C player, someone who talks a lot of crap, who's all about the gossip, and they're constantly like driving their own agenda behind the owner's backs. And so eventually that taints regular team members into becoming additionally a C player themselves. I've had that experience more than once where I have a company and a meeting, and then the team members have their own meeting after the meeting to talk about all the things that we should have been talking about, or why I'm such a jerk, or whatever. And so I remember this one time in particular, like when we finally got that person out and they actually left on their own, we didn't fire everyone else that we knew was on board with that line of thinking. So I was taught this by a coach. If we have to cut deep. And I've seen companies recently who very slowly fire people over the course of like 6 months, instead of like cleaning house and just recognizing it's time to start over. And yeah, that was probably the most painful lesson I ever learned in business, was the idea of like, yeah, once a good person has a C player in their ear, they've got to go too. It's too late. Like I'm not going to turn that around. I'm not going to give them another chance. It's easier to start over.
And the tough part with those people who are relatively toxic is that they're still productive. Like the person we're talking about was highly productive.
Very talented,
good therapist, great numbers. But when we walked into that clinic, it was ice cold. We didn't belong there. And I love how you said there was a counterculture involved, because we couldn't feel comfortable in our own clinic, right? Awesome that you've gone through that yourself with our company, but also now are able to coach people through that because you can see it so clearly, right? But how do you tell an owner that you just got to get rid of them? That's got to be so hard to do, because the fear comes into place. Well, if they're not going to see anybody, then we can't see the patients. And what does that tell the community? And it's really hard to talk to an owner about cutting deeply.
I have a very good recent example, and I won't use any company names or actual names, but this particular company, I saw it back in July. I saw the exact same situation that you and I were in.
And this is January.
This is, sorry, did I say January? I meant,
no, you said July, but
July. This is 6 months ago.
For context, this is 6 months ago, yeah.
We're in January now. This was 6 months ago. This company hires me to help them recruit. The first thing I do is a team assessment. I look at all the people currently, and it took very little time to realize that most of the team was completely like like they didn't want to be there. Now, as always, the owners do make, like in our case, we had literal mistakes that we had made, but people who are trying to take advantage of those, they exaggerate, they change things around, they really leverage whatever actual mistakes are made to make it like into self-serving, and makes it dark and evil. And so that was totally going on, even though I didn't know what the stories were. I could feel it, I could hear it, I could see it. And I just, like, early on, I had the hardest time, because I'm in a totally different state. And I'm telling this person on the coaching call, hey, listen, let's call this person Mary. Hey, Mary, your team, probably everyone needs to be fired. And they've never gone through this lesson. They're like, what? Like, yeah, you've got 7 providers. Someone in that group, and I think I even know who it is totally like causing a counterculture. And, at first, shame on me for not being bold enough. I didn't even say it that clearly. I was more hinting at it. But come like October, maybe it was even late September, I started screaming it from the rooftops. I'm like, this person is causing these problems. If you don't get rid of them now, you might have to get rid of the whole team. Yeah, and this person, my goodness, really just unfortunate what this person was doing to this company. It was sad. Yeah. And they had all the justification. That's the thing about these people. They have all the justification in their mind why it's okay to act out of integrity and like behind the scenes because they deserve it, or what's in it. I'm just trying to promote. I'm just trying to build my family. Like, all that crap when they realize that, justifying their actions. And so this group still didn't listen to it. And and so slowly over time, and this, by the way, this company, great leaders. Like there was a legitimate, some mistakes for sure that had been made, but like truly good people and like good-hearted. And so sadly, it over a 6-month period, literally every single one of their team members has either been fired or quit slowly.
Even the front desk.
Over that 6-month period. So think about what that looks like. for the owners and then trying to hire someone for that. So the cool thing is they're in a place where they've been able to rebuild it now. Mm-hmm. And it's like it's a lesson that unfortunately I wish we could tell someone that's where I could probably do better as a coach. How do I be with somebody to where they'll see it and act without having to learn the lesson the way that we do through experience? Right. I don't know. I really don't know. I honestly feel like I failed in certain cases, but I did get flown out there into that company in that 6-month window, and I got to meet with people. Oh man, I had so much PTSD.
Really?
Like, oh dude, I walked in, I felt the feeling like how you and I used to feel when we walked into that one clinic. I felt the feeling, and I felt like I was going to throw up. I almost canceled and turned around and left because the feeling was so dark. And so I stuck with it, and it was healthy for me and cathartic to like confront this group and like have these meetings and hear all the darkness just spew out of them. Yeah. And Crazy. It was really good for me to do that. But like after that, I was like, yeah, all these people need to go. And it didn't work the way that they were, they had to learn that lesson, unfortunately. But you're strong leaders. They're going to be great. That company's going to be amazing again. And I just wish there was a way that I could teach that lesson without having to experience it.
Right. Exactly. I guess I don't need to preface it too much. Simply, I'm in a bad habit, and I don't know if I'm totally over it yet, where I send out emotional emails without sleeping on them. It was kind of a thing that I was used to back in the day, and I've had to check myself quite a bit since. But yeah, sending out emotional replies, especially, or holding people accountable via email in an emotional way, is something that I've had to learn the hard way, for sure.
Oh, what a cool thing that you brought that up. It didn't occur to me. But yeah, like when someone sends it's weird how the heart always leads out in communication, and the digital communication, it almost like amplifies it. So if someone's a little pissed, it feels oftentimes a lot heavier, and then we respond in kind, and it escalates. Mm-hmm. Dude, I love that you said that. I've been in that position. It's hard to wait. It's so hard to sleep on it because you can't sleep usually because you're so pissed.
Yeah, and I feel like this needs to be addressed now. Yeah. I can't wait another 12 hours. That's not enough. No, whereas, I can. It's just a lie I tell myself, and it needs to be addressed. If it is that emotional, or if it has that kind of context, it's probably better to just at least do it on the phone, if not in person. It forces you to take some of the emotion out of it and be respectable and personable and have some humanity. Whereas it allows yourself to hide behind the guise of professionalism by sending an email, and they're going to understand clearly what I'm trying to say. So it's a hard mistake that I've had to go through a few times.
How do you hit the pause button? How do you, like when you get an email that feels like it's attacking you or just like rude, like how do you hit that pause button?
I'm learning slowly over time. And this is just the way I operate with anything that comes at me. Like we need a decision on this. Coaching over time has taught me that I need to sleep on things. Like if they're forcing you to have an answer right now, tell them no. And so the same thing with emotional emails is just, I have to learn how to like mark that email as unread and maybe come back to it later on without responding. So I know that a little bit more about myself that maybe I wouldn't have if I didn't have some coaching, to just learn how to push pause.
You know, it's funny that you say that. It reminds me of this thing that I saw on YouTube recently that people should look up. It's this man. He's got 2 Coke bottles, the glass Coke bottles, and he's in some country where it looks like it's Africa because like he doesn't have shoes on and it's a dirt floor, and he shakes them both like rigorously, and then right away he turns around and he opens one of the bottles, and of course everything explodes out, and then he starts talking about anger and like reaction. And then after about a minute, he turns around, he opens the other bottle, and it's totally fine. He goes, "What was the only difference between these 2 bottles? Time." He's like, the biggest thing we can learn, and I believe this when it comes to self-control, as both a parent and a leader, is not responding when I'm agitated. And I guess it requires a lot of self-control, but it's like as a parent, more so than a leader, like when I when I'm getting upset or fearful, which is the same almost.
Yeah.
If I can pause, which I don't always do, man, I'm so much more effective at like connecting with my kid. And so much, so obviously that same applies for our people, I guess.
Right. Yeah. It can be tough. All right. You got another one?
I mean, there's probably a million more lessons.
Oh,
Those
sure.
are the ones that I wrote.
We should probably be interviewing past employees. Hey, what do you think our biggest mistakes were?
It depends on the employee. You know, at the end, we had this team of people that like we just didn't deserve. Like we had people who thought so much higher of us than we ever were worthy of, and as a result of that, we became better people. Those are the people I'd want to ask because they would see it in the light. The people who were selfishly gaining from my mistakes, I don't want to listen to. I've got nothing to hear from them.
Maybe not interviewing Susan. Maybe not her. Maybe the others.
Susan, so what could I have done better as a leader? Oh, I'll tell you.
Not been born.
Not been born.
Something like that.
Okay. What about you? Did you have another item on your list?
I had one more. Putting appropriate emphasis and importance on planning and organization. So many times you kind of kick the can down the road on planning for the next year, organizing, strategizing, you name it. I still do that personally, especially. It's easy for me to lead other teams through it and talk to people about doing it. For me, like taking the time to strategize and plan is difficult, and I don't know why. It might be tied to the difficulty I had with holding myself accountable personally, but that's deeper psychological stuff. I just simply didn't take the time in the past, and I recognize the importance of it now and force myself to do it now, but to properly plan the upcoming year, the upcoming quarter, look forward in the next month, you name it. And things just tend to go so much easier when you do. Yeah,
that's a great point. Yeah, I mean, again, I think it goes back to the coaching concept. The thing that I mentioned at the beginning about being too busy. I think when you get that overwhelmed, for me at least, it was a matter of like, I couldn't prioritize all the things I should be doing, but I know I'm failing at. And that's where I really empathize with listeners who are in that place, because when they're driving an hour and a half one way to their practice like I did, and they're leaving when it's dark, they're coming home when it's dark, their kids aren't getting what they need, and they hear podcasts like this where it's like, you should get a coach, you should do some planning, you need to build your network, which I didn't mention, which is probably a big mistake because I didn't build my network. But like when I heard those things, it was hard to feel anything other than just like shame and like an inability, like I'm not good enough, like I couldn't do it. And ultimately, I think, so my question to you is, Nathan, how do you start that journey? Like, what would you say is the first step in like avoiding all of these mistakes by making time to do that? Like, what do you tell your clients?
Well, I'll start with what triggers me or what gets me to think more along the lines that I need to do this. And that is something that I heard from a podcast. I like how they said it. You have to imagine what you want your business to be like. So imagine you say you want $1 million company. I want $1 million company, right? Well, then you should be doing things that $1 million companies do now, and not wait until you get to $1 million to start doing those things. So if that means you need to have, you're going to have $1 million company, and you imagine that it's going to take at least 2 days a week for you to do administrative tasks. Well, build that into your day-to-day now instead of waiting until the appropriate time to do that. I think it's imagining where you want to be and then start to build that now instead of waiting until blank time.
Yeah, that is really powerful. The idea of like just becoming, when you were talking, I was thinking about like why don't more therapy practice owners like start emulating that? Like why would they? What would have them not see that they're so busy that clearly that's not healthy? I think it leads to another mistake I want to mention that I just thought of, which is that I thought my self-esteem was tied to my treating. Like I didn't see it clearly. That was more subconscious, but like the thought was no one can do it as good of a job as me. Like that kind of thing. I hear that from people I coach all the time. Like, what? Well, no one does it as good as me.
They come to see me.
Right.
I might have other therapists, but I'm the ringleader. I'm the one that's leading out on all the conversations and discussions and getting the engagement and buy-in. And if I'm not there, then what?
Yeah. And it's, you know what, it's kind of, if we wanted to simplify it, I hope someone's listening to this. I hope it's me from 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, but like, it's your ego. That's why you're so busy. Right. The reason you're so busy, and I can say this because I'm talking to myself, a younger version, but you're so busy because you don't know who you are without that feedback from your patients. And without that busyness, as much as you think you hate it, you're experiencing it like validation that you're special. Mm-hmm. Instead of seeing it for what it is, you're being weak. Because if you could take a chance on yourself to see yourself as the leader you are, you'll not only still impact those people, but the therapists that you'll see as your future patients, right? Like you'll treat them like you currently see your patients now. You'll see those employees as your opportunity to serve. Mm-hmm. And then exponentially your impact will grow. And at the end of the day, what I learned in my journey, like when we finally got to that place where we had this team of people that we didn't deserve, was that it was never about me. Mm-hmm. It was never about me. It was just the fact that I took the risk and had the money that I borrowed with friends and family to take the chance. That was the one thing that I did that put me in that position. And by learning how to be the leader those people, or tried to learn to be the leader those people deserved, I attracted better people, and then our impact increased exponentially. Right. So it's I never thought of it like that, but like what a great like realization that I hope I didn't even know that till now, but I think it's the ego. I think it's people's ego around treating that prevents them from forcing themselves to act like the $1 million company or act like the company where the owner has a family life balance.
Yeah, there's something to it. And almost every therapist I've met has had to go through it. The one person that hasn't done it and has been really cool with even starting their clinic by working part-time was the person that I've interviewed quite a bit, and that's Avi Zinn. He's the only owner that I know has said, I'm going to work part-time so I can work on my business the other days and hire a full-time person to treat the patients. He's the only owner I've ever met that's done that. But all the other owners have had such a hard time, and I'm speaking of myself as well, such a hard time taking that step out of patient care, because if I'm not seeing the patients and my schedule is the busiest, I've got the best statistics, and if I'm not seeing them all, then who's going to see them? You know, no one else in the world could possibly do as well as I do kind of attitude, then it makes it really hard to step out. And it was that, along with, I had my self-worth, like you were explaining, tied to my busyness. Like you can wear it as a badge of honor. I'm super busy. That means I'm important. And for some reason that propelled me to stay in the rut that I was in. And I remember one time reading Tim Ferriss's, is it 40-hour work week or 4-hour work week or something like that? 4-hour work week. And he said, busyness is just laziness. Oh, I love it. I've read it so many times. I've underlined it, highlighted it, and shared it with people. But if you're busy, you're just being lazy because you're not taking the time to prioritize what is most important, right? You're just doing a lot of random acts of action without focusing on what's most important that propels you forward. And so, yeah, taking the time to do that is, maybe it's just not human nature to do those things. Maybe we enjoy, well, number one, we want to feed our ego. So there's part of that. Number two, some of it is naivety. We don't know what we're going to do if we don't treat, right? That's what we spent the past 30 years of schooling doing, is learning how to treat patients. And now you're telling me don't treat. Well, now what do I do with my time? And then you definitely lose some of that identity that you've been preparing and cultivating.
Yeah, it's true though. I guess that makes sense why it's so easy to develop the ego around our treating, because all of us dreamed of becoming a PT. What's cool about our profession is that it's one of those professions that people dream about becoming. Mm-hmm. When they want to, not everyone, but most PTs are super passionate about the industry and what we're doing in healthcare overall. And their lives have been touched by a therapist that inspired them to do this. So for years, and it's not an easy thing to become, it's an art. We're one of the few fields of medicine that is arguably more art than science, but there is a lot of science as well. So to develop that skill is really hard, and it takes a decade to do. Mm-hmm. And so after a decade of dreaming, to finally be in a place where people are bringing us cookies and telling your friends and family. It's like one of the most special experiences. I'm not bagging on that. And I think that if the therapist isn't keeping their ego in check and they want to get to a place where there's better home life balance at some point, if you're an owner, you have to realize whether you intended to or not, you've signed up to become a leader. And that requires a new dream, a new vision. And they don't know, like you said, where do I even begin to dream? Because you don't know what's possible.
Right.
Well, the possible is this. I think that's where you and I could serve people the most, is that what's possible is being in a company where everyone, and I mean this, everyone loves each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like they see their work family like a family,
mm-hmm.
and they would take a bullet for each other. Maybe it's a non-lethal one, but they'll take a bullet for each other. Yeah. And they respect each other, mm-hmm. and they care about the care, and they want to serve you and their patients. That kind of experience produces a reality that I haven't been able to describe since, mm-hmm. other than to say joy. Yeah. Like, because then I was the father and the husband that they deserved to be. Because when I was an owner that like was horrible, I wasn't the father or husband my kids and wife deserved, for mm-hmm. sure. I was like drowning. It's almost like anything I was doing was just to try to keep my head above water. That's where all my mistakes came from, was mm-hmm. trying to latch on to anything that would help me breathe. Mm-hmm. And ultimately when I saw that through coaching and was able to grow past it, it was the beginning of like better than being a therapist, better than having patients bring you cookies. Yeah. Is being that person.
Yeah, it definitely, my mindset definitely changed once I understood that I was never going to lose the ownership hat, right? That I was never going to, and that if I really wanted to do something with my business to make it better or achieve the goals that I wanted or a lifestyle that I would have preferred, I had to recognize that was the one thing I couldn't either I abdicated it for a long time, but it's the one thing I couldn't delegate. And so I had to take ownership of the owner hat and recognize that I'm number one, I'm the leader, I'm the owner. If this company is not fulfilling me and my household, that's on me to make a difference. And I think I just didn't know what to do. Right. Yeah. And so that's where it comes to the point where, I need to figure out what to do. And my life's been significantly blessed ever since I've been able to say, okay, I'm the owner, let's get some stuff done. Not that I did it great, but I at least took on the responsibility and then moved forward.
Yeah. It's so funny because why you and I do what we do now has everything to do with that part of our journey, right? Mm-hmm. Like, mm-hmm. Between your coaching and the podcast, and I hope everyone hears this, like it's coming from a place of like, I want to be the change that I wish I had sooner. I want to create. Totally. And that's what I do with the Healthcare Business Academy and my billing company and my recruiting program, is I'm trying to solve the problems that we had to almost like invent the wheel in our industry. And now there's other good coaches out there as well, and other services like mine, other billing companies that are sprouting up that are also good. But like at the end of the day, like what I love about where you and I have landed is I think we're trying to give back the best we can. Mm-hmm. I mean, yes, we want to monetize, but it's more about taking the younger Nathans and Wills and like giving them that like experience without having to suffer through these things the way you and I had to do.
That's true. Definitely. Yeah, that was definitely the impetus behind starting the podcast. It was like, man, I wish there was a resource like this back in the day that I could have latched onto and said, oh, that's right. Other people are going through the same issues that I have. Oh, wait, there are other owners that have had this issue and have successfully lived and worked past it. What did they do? What was the insight that I need to know? And so I love now that we have that opportunity to share that with the podcast audience, whoever listens. It's great.
I have to say this. I can say this on behalf of both of us. For anyone who's ever worked with us on any level, whether it was a great experience or a hard experience, whether it was aligned or misaligned, just thank you, mm-hmm. all of you. Like,
definitely.
I don't think we ever, even Susan, she's a human being and she's got feelings and she's got a soul and trials and exciting things that bless her. And she helped me. Yeah. But most everyone else besides Susan, I'll tell you, we're just good people that even when they made bad choices, we recognized that we were in learning and we were learning how to develop it. So all of these people over the last 20 years have whether or not they love us or hate us. It doesn't matter. We are just grateful for you and what you've done for us. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, you've learned so much over the past couple of decades as a leader. Share with the audience what you're doing nowadays that you can do to help them.
Shameless plug, like waiting for physical therapists and go hire them. I have a program I've created called Rockstar Recruiter. It is amazing. And the reason it's amazing is because of the amount of experts that have contributed to this thing. It is the only solution that I know of for hiring PTs. People in our program are having tons of success. And I'd ask you to change your mindset. Recruiting is easy. You just don't know how to do it.
Right.
And so I teach you how to do it. That's one piece. I also do in the black, billing is still the main thing that I do on a day-to-day basis. Mm-hmm. And that is a billing and coaching company. Mm-hmm. My coaching is different in that it's geared towards your profitability. Again, coaches aren't competitive with each other. They're synergistic. And so a lot of people that work with me work with Nathan and vice versa because of what we bring to the table. But the main thing I bring with the coaching is the billing component. Yeah. And we are very fortunate. We have never lost a client, and we do it. I say this from a place of humility because it's my team, but we do it better than anyone else, hands down. I wanted to create a solution because I didn't believe outsourcing was going to be worth it.
Yep.
I never thought outsourcing was worth it. I always assumed in-house was better. And frankly, I always thought people outsourced were just bad business people. And now it's because there wasn't a lot of viable solutions out there. So I've created that. It's been around for 2 years next month.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And we've grown exponentially, but we refuse to grow faster than we can provide quality for. It's been great.
Yeah. I have never recommended outsource. And I've had episodes on the podcast that say, don't outsource, do it in-house if you can, until you guys came around. And I thought, well, here are two people between you and Katie who I trust immensely. Number two, I know the work ethic behind it. And number three, there's a communication that is there with your company that is not there with the other collection agencies, as far as I know.
Yeah, I would tell you that I have a deep personal relationship with each of my billing clients. Mm-hmm. Like when people think, I agree with all those people who say don't outsource it. If they don't know in the black, I totally agree. Don't do it.
Right.
And the main, do you want to talk about the way it looks different is that I would take a non-lethal bullet at least for each of my partners in this business. I see them as me and I treat them with probably more respect than I treated myself. I really am dedicated to them. And Katie she's Katie, man, you hired her. She's cut from a totally different cloth. And that girl will not sleep literally unless she knows that your account is under control and that you understand where your money is to the dime. So that you can focus on growing your patient volume instead of managing a billing company that you've started in-house, right?
Yeah. And we can't sign off before touting the other project that you have going. If anyone's selling their clinic, considering selling their clinic in the next 2 to 5 years, they need to be in touch with you.
Yeah. So let me summarize, because people are like, what is this guy really doing? So let me tell you, I came back from Europe. As you know, I went to Europe for 6 months with my wife and 4 kids after we sold and dreamed about how I want to change the industry. Right. I believe we have to privatize healthcare. We need to get the control back into the hands of the men and women who are providing the care. And that's why I love your podcast and everything you coach on, Nathan, because you're helping support that. What I decided to do was create the Healthcare Business Academy, which is the main business. It's like the Marriott brand of my companies. And so my main thing, I wanted to start a billing company when Katie was open to working with me because I want to help PTs launch their private practices or liquidate. Mm-hmm. So what I have created through the billing company is a way to sell your practices. I was on the phone today with 2 companies that are super excited about what I'm doing in terms of creating an offering. So it doesn't matter how many locations you have. If you have 1 location, 5 locations, it doesn't matter. I have a company that's 1.5 years old now called Multiple Exit that is bringing clinics together, companies together, teaching them how to build their business to sell. And then we're selling in 1 to 2 years. And there's zero long-term commitment up until the point of when we get a contract on the table from a buyer. But by then it's not even a risk at that point. Right. And so the company's growing fast. That's one of the reasons in the black is growing well. And the recruiting thing is simple. If my PT partners can't get more PTs in the door, they can't grow or they can't sell their practice or get out of it. So recruiting happens to be the thing that I'm probably the best at. Mm-hmm. And I leverage that across the company. So
that's cool.
So thank you for bringing that up. So Multiple Exit.
No, got to check it out. And so how do people get in touch with you?
Just my email. If you'll put it out there, I've got a YouTube channel, a 1-900 number. I don't know. Like, just my email's great.
Do 1-800 numbers exist anymore?
I don't think so. Like all the old therapists are all the young ones are like, what's that?
What's a 900?
That's so weird.
All right. So what's your email address?
It's Will, WILL, at unlockhba.com, Healthcare Business Academy. So Will at unlockhba.com.
Awesome. And they can reach out to that email regarding anything that you're doing, which is everything.
Anything at all. If you just just like you, Nathan, I know people can reach out to you with any question. Same thing, like whatever. You're trying to how to deal with a situation, you don't know how to deal with it, give us a call.
Right. Cool. Thanks for your time today, man.
Thank you.